All right, we're going to connect some things that seem totally unrelated: radioactive fungi, human trauma, and the color black. We'll do it through one single, really powerful idea. So, this explainer is all about unpacking a fascinating theory that sees the same basic pattern at work in physics, biology, and even our own culture. So, what's the big mystery here? What could possibly tie together a fungus that literally eats radiation, the deep psychological scars of a traumatic event, and why we instinctively associate the color black with things that are absolute or off limits? It sounds like a riddle, for sure, but the answer tells us something profound about how life itself gets organized. Okay, so our story kicks off in, believe it or not, one of the most hostile places on the planet, the ruins of the Chernobyl nuclear reactor. This is where scientists stumbled upon the first and maybe the most incredible piece of the puzzle. So get this, these fungi aren't just surviving in all that radiation. It looks like they're actually using it. They literally grow towards the radiation, like a plant leaning towards the sun. And the key to this unbelievable trick? Melanin. Yep, the same dark pigment that's in our skin. It's not just acting like a passive shield. It's an active ingredient in this whole process. So you can think of the melanin in these fungi like a special kind of converter. It takes this chaotic, incredibly dangerous input, all that radiation, and it transforms it into a structured, useful output, energy and growth. And this idea, this process of turning a chaotic field into an ordered pattern by passing it through a boundary, that's the core idea we're going to be chasing today. Okay, so now we're going to take this idea from a single weird fungus and blow it up into a universal principle, one that might just explain how all complex systems, including us, deal with chaos. And this is what the theory calls the needle eye principle. It sounds kind of strange, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Just imagine this huge, messy storm of energy or information. The needle eye is the boundary that doesn't just block it, but actually absorbs it, filters it, and squeezes it through this tiny opening, organizing it into a clear, simple pattern on the other side. This slide just lays it out perfectly. It's a three-step process. First, you've got the field. That's your chaotic input. Second, you have the needle eye. That's the boundary doing all the hard work. And third, you get the pattern, the nice, orderly output. Let's go back to the fungi, right? Radiation was the field, melanin was the needle eye, and growth was the pattern. You're going to see this exact structure show up over and over again. All right, so we've seen it in tiny fungi. Now let's zoom out and see how this same exact idea plays out inside you and me, in our bodies, and even in our minds. And this isn't just some neat metaphor, you know? It's literally happening in our bodies. In our skin, melanin is a needle eye that absorbs the chaotic field of UV radiation to keep our DNA safe. Our immune system? Same deal. It's a super complex boundary that filters a whole field of potential germs and produces a clear pattern of response, either repair or attack. Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. What happens when that chaotic field isn't something physical, but something psychological? What happens to our minds when we get totally overloaded by a traumatic event? Well, according to this model, a major trauma can actually cause our psychological boundaries, our own mental needle eyes, to just harden up. You know, before the trauma, our boundaries are pretty flexible. We can see the gray areas, we can handle ambiguity. But after that overload, the boundary can collapse into this rigid, almost trigger-happy state. It starts ignoring context and reacting to the smallest thing as if it's a huge threat. And the way the source material describes this is, well, it's pretty haunting. It says a traumatic event can cause a whole part of your experience, a place, a sound, a memory, to basically turn black. It becomes an absolute boundary, a total no-go zone where all nuance just gets swallowed up, kind of like how a black surface swallows light. Okay, so we've gone from biophysics to psychology. Now for the last big leap, into culture itself. How does this pattern show up in the symbols we all share? And why do we seem to be so drawn to the color black to represent these kinds of absolute limits? And we're going to start with a question that sounds, well, a little silly, but stick with me here. Why is cola black? It's a weird question, I know, but the answer tells us a whole lot about how these symbolic boundaries actually work. I mean, just think back to clear colas like Crystal Pepsi, right? Chemically, they were pretty much the same thing, but they were a total flop. And why? Because people said they didn't taste right. The familiar experience was missing something essential, and it wasn't a chemical. You see, that dark color acts as a symbolic needle eye. It's an engineered boundary that takes all the different sensory inputs, the bubbles, the sweetness, the brand, and it compresses them into the stable, recognizable category we call cola. Take away that black boundary, and the whole experience kind of falls apart, even if the molecules are identical. Okay, time to put all the pieces together. We've talked about fungi, trauma, even soda. And this is the moment where we see how they are all, amazingly, different versions of the exact same deep pattern. This slide just lays it all out so perfectly. Just look at the structure here. It's identical at every single level. At the level of biophysics, you have radiation as the field, melanin as the needle eye, and growth as the pattern. For immunity, pathogens are the field, the immune system is the needle eye, repair is the pattern. In the mind, experience is the field, our plasticity is the needle eye, memory is the pattern. And in culture, narratives are the field, shared symbols are the needle eye, and stable categories are the pattern. It's the same logic, just scaled up. It's incredible. So, what does this all mean? This brings us to the final, and honestly, the most profound takeaway from this whole idea. What does this say about us as human beings? The source puts it in this really poetic way. It suggests that human culture itself is like a layer of melanin for consciousness. I mean, think about it. We live in this vast, chaotic, overwhelming field of raw information. And our stories, our laws, our myths, these are our needle eyes. They are the protective boundaries that absorb all that chaos and transform it into a meaningful world that we can actually live in. And that leaves us with a really important question, especially for right now. In this age of just constant information overload, where our mental boundaries are being pushed to the breaking point, what's our melanin? What are the new boundaries we need to build to filter this endless digital field and find a stable, meaningful pattern within it all? That's something to think about.